The energy in this room is the spirit of the landscape talks. It's about talking with each other, not to each other, but with each other. It's about sharing ideas. And we have a perfect opportunity later on to ask questions, to add contribution, to give critique as well, because we are exchanging ideas. And we want to make this better and better. Now, during this session, we want to talk about money. I wish it was coming in some of our pockets. We want this money, yes. And we do know that landscape degradation directly affects 1.5 billion people, many of whom live in extreme poverty. Now, as we talk about money, we will be sharing on landscapes that profit for businesses, people, and nature. Because we all need money. But how do we finish this equation? And we have an interesting, fantastic list of speakers coming up, starting by Violaine Berger, who leads the mitigation of deforestation impact theme of the IDH, the Sustainable Trade Initiative, a foundation whose mission is to accelerate and upscale sustainable trade by building impact-oriented coalitions across all stakeholders. She will be telling us how to woo the public-private civil societies into partnerships to address deforestation. Please help me welcome on stage Violaine, please.
Thank you. Many thanks to all of you for being here on a Saturday at 6 p.m. It shows your dedication. So I've got 7 minutes to convince you that one of the best ways to address complex issues such as deforestation is to set up public, private, and civil society partnerships. And I'm going to do so by explaining, by showcasing the Cocoa and Forest Initiative, which is a public-private civil society partnership that aims to address deforestation, to end cocoa-related deforestation. And this is an initiative that is convened by IDH, the Sustainable Trade Initiative, which is the organization I'm working for, and the World Cocoa Foundation. But to start with, I'd like to give a bit of an illustration of what a complex challenge is. And I'm going to use the example of Côte d'Ivoire and the deforestation in this country. So in Côte d'Ivoire, at the start of the previous century, actually forest was covering 18 million hectares. Nowadays, it's less than 2 million hectares and is continuing to shrink. It's even more striking when we look at the maps of deforestation and most recent deforestation between the 1990 and 2015. It's 180,000 hectares that were just gone every year. So what is happening and what is driving deforestation? Well, the simple answer is agriculture expansion, and it's mostly cocoa farming that is causing deforestation. But this is a simple answer. Okay, cocoa farming is driving deforestation. But this is a bit more complex than that. So as to tell you the story of deforestation in Côte d'Ivoire, I'm going to zoom in on a specific region, which is the southwest of the country. And I like to take the example of a forest reserve called Guandébé, which is the one highlighted in red a bit at the top, which was covering 133,000 hectares. And now it's about, 90% degraded. It's almost gone. There's almost nothing that is left. So what happens there? So we need to go back a bit in history to understand how this has happened. So first, this forest was, well, gazetted as a forest reserve during colonial time. But then in the 1970s, the government encouraged a bit of cocoa farming to happen in the middle of that forest. But then people were told in 1988, well, actually, this is a protected forest, so you need to get out. And then some people went out, some people stayed, and then, well, as from 2001, the political crisis started. And then there was armed forces getting in the forest, there were migrants coming in, chopping trees, starting planting cocoa and other crops, etc. And this is how gradually the forest disappeared. So when we're saying, oh, this is the cocoa farming and this is the cocoa industry that is causing deforestation, well, the stories that I've just told you shows us that it's a bit more complex than that. It's not just one single driver. There's multiple forces that came into play that resulted in deforestation. So this is why, because there's not one single driver of deforestation, there's not one single solution. And to address that issue, well, the government alone, well, is not able to address it. And companies alone, well, they need the government to be able to address that. They can improve the traceability of the cocoa supply chain, etc., but they need the government, well, to help them in doing so. And the companies also need civil society organizations, because what we're talking about are people. It's really cocoa farmers that are in these forests. And if we ask them not to farm cocoa, then what are the alternative livelihoods? So this is why, well, we're really advocating for these public, private, and civil society partnerships. And actually, this is how we also started this initiative called the Cocoa and Forest Initiative. So it all started actually with 12 cocoa companies gathering in London in March last year and signing a joint statement of intent committing to end deforestation in the cocoa value chain. So it started with 12 cocoa companies, and now we've got 35 that signed the initiative. Immediately after the signature, we brought together the government, but also civil society organizations to develop an action plan, so a joint framework for action that was detailing exactly what needed to happen on the three pillars of not only forest protection and restoration, but also sustainable production and community engagement, also social inclusion, social safeguards. Then these frameworks for action were further developed into longer action plans supported by a governance. So now we've got really structured governance systems in Ghana and in Côte d'Ivoire that really helps the whole process. So very quickly, the learning from this example are that, well, these issues that we're trying to address are very complex. And we need to acknowledge that. And we need also to acknowledge that this can't be solved by one stakeholder alone. We need to create this multi-stakeholder coalition. We need to bring together the public sector, private sector, civil society organizations to discuss about, okay, what are the priorities? What is it that we're going to work on? Also, because the issues are complex, there's not one single solution, and we need to develop a combination of measures at global, national, and also regional and landscape level. The thing is that we need to acknowledge that it takes time. You can't achieve this overnight, but it's only by doing this, by building these coalitions, that you can have a long-lasting impact, because you can then influence policies, because you can really attract new investments in the landscape so as to reduce deforestation and help with also restoring the forests that have been degraded. So this is my pitch on why these multi-stakeholder coalitions are really key to address complex challenges. Thank you.